because sometimes the core of those conflicts happen to be on the thought that my truth is the only truth. Everybody else's truth is not truth. And the idea of pluralism is to really see what can we do now. Here, when we reflect on pluralism, we're talking about religious pluralism in particular. You can have cultural pluralism, you can have other forms of pluralism, but today our focus will be, with the eminent religious scholar that we have here, specifically on religious pluralism. It matters. It matters immensely. And the thought of clinging to an idea that my own faith is superior to any other faith happens to have some challenges. And my question would be, how can we hope for peace when absolutely everyone is holding to their absolute truth? So where is the faith perspective on this? A famous theologian, Hans Kuhn, he said, and I quote, that there will be no peace. There will be no peace amongst the people of this world unless there is peace amongst world religions. Very profound words in terms of where this conflict lies. So, if I may add, the need for pluralism, to discuss and understand it in its true essence, that there is no chance of peace amongst religions if each believes that I am on the right path. Now, I'm sure Sayyidina here will talk about John Hick, who is perhaps the father of modern pluralism. But his concept of pluralism, just to build that background before I end this over, was to try and mitigate the Christianity ethos of saying there can only be salvation through Christ. And Hicks comes out with this understanding that salvation can have many paths, and I'll leave it to our scholar to delve deeper into this. For me, just to raise a question, to say, how do we feel comfortable with pluralism when the Holy Quran very clearly says in Surah Al Imran, ayah number 84, that whoever seeks any religion other than Islam never shall be accepted from him in the next world. He shall be amongst the losers. And that is a challenge that we have as believers, as to how do we interpret, how do we follow this verse of the Holy Quran when the injunction apparently seems to be so clear. And we're talking about pluralism. When we live in a multicultural society, how do we adjust? And this is the subject today. So, without further ado, and inshallah we will be discussing this, I will let Sayyid Ali Abbas give a perspective on the opening remarks, and then we will have a question and answer session. It really is a conversation. I sometimes humorously say that at OASIS Center, the floor is all one level. There's a meaning behind it. And that is, it's a conversation amongst equals with a scholar. But he's not sitting on a pedestal. He's here to engage with us, and I know his ability to be able to touch every one of us with his knowledge. I also want to acknowledge Ambassador Sada Kambar, Professor Cyrus, a contractor, our elder Dr. Bartadali Charania, amongst others, who have graced this, august body, and not to mention the support, as always, of my dear neighbor Siraj Darsi, who is always with us at OASIS. So we thank each one of you for being here this morning. And now I will introduce our esteemed speaker, if I can find his resume, which is very long, and I will not take the whole thing. But this man who is in front of us, is, as I say, is a man of the cloth. But he's much more than a man of the cloth. He is an embodiment of interfaith relationships, having met people from all classes and all cultures, including having had the pleasure of meeting the Pope. He interacts in a society with his impact. He is a true ambassador of our faith, the faith of Islam. He's a British scholar, a religious leader, and has an interest in Islamic philosophy, mysticism, comparative religion. And in particular, he focuses upon the concept of love theoretically and applies those insights from a theological perspective. I could say much more about him in terms of his proficiency in several languages, but besides undertaking that level of bridge building and engaging communities across faiths and across faith traditions, he founded the first Shia-Sunni alliance in Scotland to promote dialogue, intra-faith dialogue, and also has partnered with 12 national charities across Scotland and is the global ambassador for Glasgow, the caring city. He's also been active with the World Religion of Parliaments and many others. And please do take advantage when we mingle after this event to talk to him and let him share his own perspective. So with that said, I would like to invite him either there where you're sitting, Saidna, or at the podium, whatever is comfortable, to perhaps answer a couple of these burning questions. Given the ayah that I quoted, how do we deal with this idea of religious groups? With that, please welcome him with a loud salam.
I'm extremely humbled by your introduction, your words. You two are a scholar, and I'm surrounded by scholars, so in the company of the wise, sometimes saying less is more. But now the question has been asked. Let me address it, I think, probably in three ways. I'm starting off with the history of what Islam is and how we came to where we are today. And then I'll slowly move into the verse of the Quran, and then look at it post the verse of the Quran. When Islam comes about, you find that the Arabian Peninsula is quite a unique place. It's different from all other places. And immediately you find two strands of Islam and two strands of Christianity, which are brewing in the Arabian subcontinent or in the Arabian Peninsula, which you don't find anywhere else in the world. The reason being is that up to 70 years after Christ, you have a church known as the Church of Jerusalem. And there were Christians who didn't use the term Christian, but they were a sect of Judaism. So Christianity itself later on becomes a religion. But in the time of Jesus and post-Jesus, at least in the first century, they were regarded as a sect of Judaism. And in this way, what you find is that eventually an extermination process takes place. That those Jews who were Christian, so they were known as Jewish Christian, were eventually wiped out. And by the Nicene Council, every member of that council was a non-Jew. Initially, Jews upheld, or these Christians who were Jews upheld all the principles of the Torah and the Talmud and all of the other parts of the scripture, circumcision and so forth. But as this evolved, you found that Christianity moved in a different direction. And when persecution began, these Jewish Christians came to Arabia. And so this is where, if you look at the Quran, there's an interplay. That sometimes it talks about the Trinitarians, but in other spaces it talks about Christians who believed in the same God as Moses and as Abraham. same principles. So you find that within this climate in Mecca and Medina both, there are Christians who are residing there, and then there are Jews who are residing there. So if you go back to St. Paul, what do you find? St. Paul goes to the Arab Peninsula for a number of years, then coming back with the ideas of Christianity. And then after that, everything else is in front of you. After the destruction of the first temple, so as you know, the temple has been destroyed twice. The first time it was destroyed, it was by Nebuchadnezzar. The high priests left and they went to the Arabian Peninsula. And so you'll find that those individuals who are specialists in temple studies, including a very famous lady by the name of Elizabeth, who used to be at Cambridge University, is now retired. And there's only 2 or 3 people in the world who read this archaic language. She concluded on the fact, she said that either the high priests of the first temple built the Kaaba, or Abraham himself came to build the Kaaba. It's not possible for anybody else to do so because the diametrics of the Kaaba is exactly that of the Holy of the Holies that was found in the temple. So what you find here now brewing is first temple Judaism within the Arabian Peninsula. And hence you find Jews in Khaybar and other places. So Judaism is of 2 strands, first temple and second temple. So in this way, when you have first temple Judaism, which is brewing, you've got 2 strands of Christianity, which is also brewing there. And then there's another type of monotheism, which was known as the Hanifs. So here Abraham has 2 sons, Isaac and Ishmael. The descendants of Ishmael were Hanifs. They believed in the one God. So automatically you find that there's pluralism existing, and then you have polytheism as well. So today, as you know, many academics are debating that Islam is just a kind of a rollover from the Syriac church, that a lot of these scrolls which have been found are contained in the Quran. In fact, some of the verses of them are contained. And in fact, I'd go further than that and say that there's 6,600 odd verses in the Quran. 900 of them deal with Bani Israel. 900 of them are actually answering questions raised by the Christians. So I say yes, there may be those very verses found in the Syriac Gospels which never made it to the New Testament. And they may be in the Quran, but if you look at the way the Quran is talking, it's answering questions. And so therefore today, without interfaith, or without actually understanding the Bible or the Torah, there is no way we as Muslims can understand 900 verses. And this is why many a time when we are interpreting certain verses, it doesn't make sense to us. I'll give you an example. You recite Ayatul Kursi, right? What do you say? Allah doesn't sleep, He doesn't slumber. Your child knows he doesn't sleep and he doesn't slumber. But that's not the point. The point is that that verse is answering another verse raised by members of the children of Ishaq. So you'll see many a time there's questions answered, and we won't understand it. But then why is Allah saying this? It doesn't make any sense. Of course, we believe in a God. No, the questions which are being answered. So without truly understanding, and you'll see this as well, that even when it comes to our religious rulings, the Shia tend more towards the Jews. So for example, within the Shia maktab, you can't, or at least 99%, can't eat other than scaly fish, the crab, lobster, and all sorts. Haram for the vast majority. Okay, there are some people who may say otherwise. But for the vast majority of Shias, they tend towards, in this particular perspective, Judaism. And then many rules within Judaism which are found parallel within Islam. In fact, over 90% of rulings you'll find parallel. And even to the extent that sometimes prayer timings, the idea of the qibla, it's very similar. So naturally, the first thing is this. Islam hasn't come at all to say we're exclusive. Islam is not saying in any shape or form we're bringing together an idea which is brand new. No such thing. What Islam is doing, as it says, it's perfecting and it's completing. And hence the verse of the Quran, Al-Yawm akmaltu lakum dinakum. The idea that I've completed your deen today. That deen which was started, monotheism of Islam, is found in Abraham. And the laws are found in Moses. And the spirituality is found in Jesus. But the akhlaq that makes a man is found within the Prophet Muhammad. So historically, here's a prophet, and he's born in an atmosphere where he knows exactly what's taking place. So no realists argue, they say, well, no, he seems to have borrowed ideas. No, there's no doubt about it. There's a discussion which is taking place. And here Islam isn't coming forward and saying, by the way, we're brand new. No, we're saying we're a continuation. And coming to your verse, look at the Quran and see. Abraham is a Muslim, but the Prophet came 1400 years ago. Moses is a Muslim, Jesus is a Muslim. No. Here Islam means what? Taslim means submission to one God. It means monotheism, in essence. And anybody who submits to monotheism is a Muslim. That's one of the prominent Jews of Europe. And I was speaking to him today, so I know he's not going to mind me using his name. Vice President of the Board of Deputies, Edwin Shukar. He's from Iraq. And he's gone to Najaf and he's gone to Karbala. Edwin Shukar always says, we are Musawi Muslims, but people have forgotten this. You've capitalized on the term Muslim. But because we're Arab, we know Islam means monotheism. And they're Isawi Muslims, because they believe in Isa, and they're Isa's Jesus. So Islam is an overriding title, which is in essence used for monotheism, the belief in the one God. And you'll see this across. When you go into the Vedic tradition, if you read that in Veda Vedanta, you'll see the idea of monotheism comes through. If you go into Taoism, you'll see the idea of monotheism comes through. The world religions have a deep understanding of what monotheism is, because if you look at them, you'll see a deep spirituality there. And the famous Iranian Sufi mystic, Sohrawardi Shahabuddin, he believes that he's from a line of mystics, this perennial wisdom which is coming. And Islamic philosophers were always the same. They said that there is a perennial wisdom which starts with Adam. And this perennial wisdom, the Sophia perennius, is passed down from generation to generation to generation. And this wisdom is timeless. It has different shells. It could be wearing a turban, it could be wearing a kippah, it could be wearing a cap, you could be wearing a suit. The outer shell may differ. Essence is the same. This wisdom has been going on for thousands of years, and this wisdom will continue for thousands of years. So there's a wisdom there. And Islam doesn't negate this, but what the Quran says is that it's muhaymin. It is heavier. It is above, in essence. It rises above. So for example, it doesn't sink, it floats. It rises above. Because there's something special within the Quran that's unexplored. And what's special about the Quran, in essence, it's not that it's a book of law, because it's not. If you were to go by the Quran, there would be no Sharia, by the way. There's only 300 verses, and none of them actually make sense when it comes to Sharia. You wouldn't be able to, unless it's pray. How do you pray? Quran doesn't tell you how to pray. So there's many rules in the Quran which are not there. Because the Quran itself says, I'm not a book of Sharia. Hudan wa rahmatun wa bushra. I'm a guidance. I'm a mercy. I'm a glad tiding to people. So it's not depressing. I'm a mercy unto people. And the proof's in the pudding. Read it and see. When you read it, it has an effect on the heart. It brings peace to the heart. So the purpose of it is mystical. It isn't looking at it literally. And those people who have looked at it literally, look where they are now. It brings peace. So hence, where does Islam begin? Islam begins within this cradle of pluralism. And if you look at the Prophet's life, he's not rejecting anyone. So think about it. When the Prophet comes in, who does he empower? The Prophet comes from the Banu Hashim, elite class. You look at it and see, right? He's from the elite. But who are his followers in the first 13 years in Mecca? Poor. People who are poor, from the lower classes. Black slaves, women. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because the Arabs in those days, for them a black slave was subhuman and a woman was subhuman. And so what does a prophet do? He grabs them and he says, they're my followers. And they're the people of heaven. And he changes the social fabric immediately. The ability to bring people together and to convene is what the prophet does. Now accelerate forward and see. 13 years later, he goes to Medina. What does the prophet say? Somebody once said to me, they said, look, you Muslims only talk about Sharia law. What would you do? For example, if we gave you Wales, and I said, if you gave you Wales, we'd make it Dubai. That's what we'd do. Took a step back there, you've got a point. What did the prophet do though? The pluralism of the prophet is beyond any Western democracy, or any democracy on earth, and I'll tell you why. Here's Medina. Medina is divided into 6 parts. 1/4 is for Jews, one part of it is for Christians, part of it is for Muslims, and so forth. Each one of them has been told, you rule by your own rules. within your territory. Whatever your rules are, you rule by them. If there's an issue amongst you, then come to me. Now, automatically, what does that tell you? Okay, put the pluralism to one side. That tells you the Prophet knew about the other religions to say, come to me. He must have been an expert. Because if I'm not an expert in Judaism, I'm not going to say to a Dayan or a rabbi, come to me if there's a problem. Or, for example, a Pope, come to me if there's an issue in Christianity. What does that tell you? And the only other person within Islamic history to have ever said that is Imam Ali. Nobody else. Imam Ali says, he says to the Jew, I'll judge you with your Torah. And Christian, I'll judge you with your Bible. Muslim, I'll judge you with your Quran. Why? Ali is Ali. The only person so close to the Prophet that he's taken the essence of the Prophet. And if you are a light of Ali in your life, how are you going to implement that? Same thing. Same philosophy as they have, pluralism. Now go deeper and see. You all believe in Imam Hussein, regardless of who you are. People today, when they're going to Karbala, and I was saying to a couple of our friends just the other day, I was in a tube coming out of an event in St. Ethelberg, the Lord Mayor of London held an event. So I came out of it. And when I got into the tube, there was a priest there. He said to me, "You're Shia?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I went to Karbala." Took a step back. I said, "Really?" He said, "Oh yeah, they did a documentary of my life just this year. I was in Karbala for Arbaeen." I said, "Okay, tell me more." He said, "I saw the rush, got a bit scared." And then he stopped, and tears came into his eyes. He said, "But it was as if Hussein was calling me to him, so I closed my eyes and opened it, and I was there next to him." So Imam Hussein. So Hussein appeals to everyone. Our Imams aren't just figures for Muslims. Imam are universal figures, because Islam is universal. It's for everyone. Imam gives peace wherever they go. It doesn't matter to who. Whether you follow him or you don't follow him, the Imam is the Imam. Gives you peace. Sayyidah Zainab, in fact, Fatima Zahra gives a very beautiful statement. Somebody asked her, they said, "Why didn't your husband take back what was his right?" She said, "The example of my husband is the example of the Kaaba. You want to do Hajj, you go to the Kaaba to do Hajj. Kaaba's not going to come to you to ask you to do Hajj. Ali's like the Kaaba. You want Ali, you go to Ali. Ali's not going to come to you. You want him, you need him, he doesn't need you. Right? So it's the same way. Ali's not going to take a sword out and fight. He doesn't need to fight. If you need him, you go to him. And people did. So look at Imam Hussein in Karbala. If you look at it, it's the first group of 72 people where there were ethnic Jews, ethnic Christians, Sindhis from India, ethnically Sindhi people were there. And Imam Hussein's wife, one of them was Sindhi. Zayd al-Shari's mother was Sindhi from India. Here, when we use the term Sindh, it means Hind, it means India, right? In the olden days, 1400 years ago. So you'll see this within Ahlul Bayt itself. Now look at your Imams. How many of your Imam Ja'far Sadiq had blue eyes? Why did he have blue eyes for? Which lineage? The Aryan lineage of Iran, for example. One of the Imam has curly hair. Why? These are descriptions now, no? Here, I'm describing what it says in the books. Because his mother was Nubian. Another Imam. Who was his mother? His mother was from North Africa. In a time where Arabs were racist, Ahlul Bayt had no discrimination. We'll take a woman from India, no issues. We'll take a woman from East Africa, no issues. This is why I say Islam was in East Africa before it was in India. North Africa, no issues. Eastern Europe, no issues. So if you look at the span of the Imamate, how it spread. Their mothers in the last 1400 years have been from all different walks and different backgrounds. And there's a hikmah behind that, there's a wisdom behind that. Because it makes everyone feel that the Imam is a part of us. So if Islam is used in a positive way, then you'll understand that it is a part of you. Now, that's the historic part. So let's get to a bit of the theological part then. In the Quran, and it's important to contextualize the verses. If I cherry pick a verse, what happens? People who do that are labeled ISIS. Islam has a very rich history, in particular of scholarship. Islam is a peaceful religion, the proof is in the pudding. If wars are taking place, there is no intellectual advancement. Look at Islam and see. The world's intellectual advancement took place in the Islamic period, the foundations of what we have today, because there was peace. The very famous Rambam, Maimonides, the Jewish Mishnah Torah, when he wrote it, he was in Egypt. If he was worried about his life, he would not be able to write something profound like that. If you look at the Kabbalah in North Africa and in southern Spain, you don't develop mystical concepts when your life is in danger. Christianity and some of the Eastern churches and their rise and the academic discussions which were taking place within the Islamic world, they were taking place. At the time where you found the Upanishads being translated into Arabic, why were they being translated into Arabic? Because of that intellectual development and ferment. So Islam has never been against intellectual development. And the most important thing about Islam is this, that it takes on everything, is all-encompassing. It wants people to study. Look at the Akhwan al-Safa, for example. Profound philosophers, Ismaili philosophers. And they were taking Neoplatonic ideas and they were enhancing them and they were developing them. Akhwan al-Safa are very famous. Their rituals and their books, in terms of their books of rituals, spread across, they were polymaths, meaning they were multidisciplinarians. That is something that Islam teaches. And I know today in universities we have specialization. But even today, if you go into the aristocracy, at least of Europe, they don't believe in just specializing in one thing. They're polymaths, they believe in multiple different things. Head of state, for example, within Europe, can talk about multiple different issues. That's what makes a leader. If I'm sitting with you, I look at you, let's say you're from Iran, I can talk about Rumi with you. And if I go to Pakistan, I should be able to talk about Iqbal with you. And if I go to India, I should be able to talk about the Shankaracharya with you, for example, and so forth. This idea of multidisciplinarism is something that Islam preaches. And this is why you find that the Imams are able to speak to different people in different disciplines. And Imam Ja'far Sadiq is very famous. Even today, 150 subjects are taught. Imam, in those days, was teaching over 200 subjects. Over 202 subjects that our universities today don't teach. So that tells you something. Islam is the diversity of knowledge, correspondences of knowledge which is taking place, writings which are going on, dialogue which is taking place. All of these things are important. Unfortunately, we don't do them today. It's as if we've gone backward. And I'm not just talking about Islam. Unfortunately, the world has gone backward today. There is no tolerance anymore in the world. It's either my way or the highway. But in those days, there was tolerance and there was dialogue. You know, could you believe that the likes of Sheikh Mufid was also studying in the Sunni seminaries, and the Sunnis were studying in the Shia seminaries? The last great scholar, you could say, who benefited from both Sunni and Shia disciplines died in the late 80s, Meccan South, in the subcontinent. The second largest, you could say, Ijazat, Meccan South. Hundreds of pages. Many Sunnis have given him permission as well, licenses as well. But we don't have that anymore. Maybe one Shia scholar that studied in the Sunni seminary. Zero probably, or maybe one or two, that I don't know of. And how many Sunnis come and study with Shias? And that's something. And I'll go back further and see. Then if I was to tell you, could you imagine that there were Shias who would be studying with Christians? You'd say, oh my God, that's blasphemous. But it wasn't back in those days. And do you know how Kabbalah developed? Where Sufism, spirituality met with Jewish mysticism, we found a development that takes place. This is why the concept of dhikr that they choose to comes from Sufism. Maimonides' son was a Sufi. Many people may not know that. It's famous that they did. So you see this cross-pollination which is taking place. So had it been the case that we were exclusivists, and that's it, and those people before us knew the Quran better than we do, let's be honest. In the first 100 years of Islam, they would have known the Quran, but they were having a dialogue about it. There was a discussion and there was cross-pollination which was taking place. Which means we could live together. We could live together, we could share in the end. And that didn't make me less of a Muslim. The likes of Avicenna doesn't become less of a Muslim. The likes of Avicenna, when he studies Plotinus and he studies Aristotle, he becomes more of a Muslim. It actually enhances and not diminishes him. If anyone has studied scriptural reasoning, they'll say, when you look at other people's texts, by the end of it, you feel more Muslim than you did before. The truth within your faith starts to come out. That's why don't ever feel scared to say to your children, go and study the Bible. Study the Torah. Get in there. No issue whatsoever. You'll see the beauty of your own faith come out. And at least you'll begin to start, well, at least you'll start to understand 900 verses of your own Quran. 1/6 of your own Quran is pending on other scripture because it's answering the question which already is there. So this is why we can see the Quran is complex. But the best verse of the Quran in this respect, I would say, in my humble opinion, is what you recite in every interfaith event. That we created you from a single soul, that you may come to know one another. And we divided you into different tribes. What's the purpose of different tribes for? Allah could have made you all the same. You could have been robotic. It wasn't the divine plan. He wanted somebody to be brown and somebody to be black, and somebody to have one faith and somebody to have another, and somebody to be of one tongue and somebody to be of another tongue. Why? So that you come to know each other. Why? This is the divine reflection. Allah, the name itself, is in unity. Now, a bit of the technical stuff, but bear with me, I'll try and explain to the best of my ability. Allah, the name is Ism Jam. Ism Jam means that the name Allah gathers all the other names. 99 names, or in Joshan Kabir, 1001 names. The bottom line is the names of Allah endless. The reason being is that everything that you see in creation is a combination of names. I'll give you an example. There's water in front of you. 3 names of Allah came together to produce it. Ar-Rahman, Al-Hayy, and Al-Latif. When these 3 come together, it produces what is known as water. Each one of you is a product of a name, or names coming together. Shaitan, for example, Ar-Rahman, Al-Aziz, Jabbar, Mutakabbir, Mudil. When these names came together, it produced Shaitan. Right? So all of these names come together. When all of Allah's names come together, it produces Muhammad and Allah Muhammad. So you can't understand it. I can't claim to understand the Imam because I may have 5 or 7 names. He has endless names in it. The heart of the Imam flows, the heart of the Prophet flows the nur of Allah with all of the names. Right? So based on that, if the entire world is just made of names of Allah, now you understand why Allah created in diversity. You come to know yourself when you come to know another person. The diversity you find in somebody else is actually found deep inside of you. This is why the name of Allah, Rahman, contains actually all of the names of Allah. It's interesting because that may be water, but inside that water is the entire universe. So allow me to quote what Imam Ali says there. Why do you look at yourself as such a small people? You contain the entire universe in yourself, because you do. Housed in your heart is the entire universe. But outwardly, there's diversity. And so Mullah Sadra put it well. What you see is unity and multiplicity and multiplicity and unity. We're different, but we're the same. We're multiple, but all that multiplicity goes back to one again. You know why? Because all of human being is one person. That person's name is Adam. So Allah calls us Bani Adam. So Adam's a prototype. And as Adam is stripped, you and me and everybody else is created. No, Adam is the universe. The Prophet is the universe. Prophecy is and everything around you is because of that one soul. I don't want to go deeper into the mystical dimensions only because it'll require a bit more explanation. And we're going to start breaking it down. And I know it's not a discussion on spirituality per se. The one thing I will say is this. If you notice, all the mystics got to the same conclusion. The only difference is that the followers of Ahlul Bayt were able to get to that maqam of ru'yat that others weren't able to get to. Because then you ask, they said, well, okay, fine. If all the mysticisms are the same, then why follow one particular religion? But look, every religion is an initiation into the path. But what Islam has to offer is the refinement and the balance of the names that takes a person to peace. This is why the Quran says, Allah bi dhikr Allah. That balance is important. When you're at balance, you'll see there's no aggression, passiveness, it's at balance. And hence the Prophet said, so the only purpose, إِنَّمَا وَإِذْتُ لِأُتَمِّمْ, to complete makaram al-akhlaq. The purpose of the Prophet coming is to complete your akhlaq, the ethics, the virtue inside of you. And so Abraham came forward with virtue ethics. And today there's no second to virtue ethics. When we talk about all sorts of consequentialism and deontologicalism and all that, actually there's no second to virtue ethics. Abraham bought it, Muhammad refined it. And nobody else was able to do that. By refining the virtues, you came into balance. That's why we're Muslims today. Because of that balance, right? So when you have all of these teachings. Now, in fact, let's focus very quickly on the Quran. It's important to come to understand the Quran with the Quran. And whereas Allah creates you in all sorts of diversity, the only time He says that a person is greater than another person as well, inna akramakum indallahi atqakum, when it comes to piety. If you're a person who helps another man or a woman, regardless of their creed, somebody comes to your door. If you look at the sunnah of the Prophet and the Imams, it was this. Anyone who came to your door, you never turned them away. They may be asking for $100, you may not have it, but you have $5, right? You've got something, give them something. Automatically, you're lofting the eyes of God. To follow the tenets of God, not lying, not cheating, not stealing. Automatically, you become mukarram in the eyes of Allah. To help people, right? To help the orphan. All of these things which are innately inside of you is what makes you better. So remember, belief in monotheism, the Quran talks about, which is what Islam symbolizes. Here the Quran says, for example, you've read this verse, whether you're a Jew or a Christian or a Sabi'in, but the important thing is believing in Allah and the last day to do good deeds. Now he's resolved that here. We've got a massive problem there because we've got a theological issue now. Allah's saying, okay, you can be a Muslim, but that means that you believe in Allah and you believe in the last day and you do good deeds. And Allah said, your heaven is guaranteed for you. Let's try and do it then. Right? And yes, we can go into deeper discussions. That when it becomes a proof on you that this Imam is yours, then if you reject the Imam, yes, then you will go to hell. You know, people ask the question, can non-Muslims go to heaven? We'll say anyone can go to heaven. On the Day of Judgment, if an atheist stands up to God and says, Allah, they couldn't prove it to me that you existed. I looked at religion, all I saw was wars. This is Shaykh Mutahiri's argument, by the way, that I'm moving forward. If a person comes forward and says, look, it didn't make sense to me, because all these religious people are killing each other, and I tried my best, but they couldn't prove it to me. I had certainty you didn't exist. Allah going to put him in hell? Imam Ja'far Sadiq said, your religion is based on certainty. But if certainty comes to you, and you know Islam is the right religion, but you're like, okay, I'm not going to follow it because it's not cool to be a Muslim, then there's an issue. Because the truth has come and you've rejected it. Hell is for those who, what does kafir mean? What does kufr mean? When you clothe and you hide the truth. That's all it is. If I'm hiding the truth, there's a problem. But I come out and tell you what the truth is. So anyhow, I know we can go on. And I'm tempted to go on. But what I'll do is, because it's an interactive discussion, I'd like it to be interactive. As we say, we're all on the same level playing field. I'm going to hold it there. But just allow for it to sink in. That maybe what we see as the face of Islam today wasn't always the case. Our authentic teachings teach us to respect, to live with, to share ideas, and to be brothers and sisters with the wider purpose. So there is no contradiction when it comes to pluralism in Islam. Actually, it's the reverse. Islam teaches you to accept diversity because Allah's names are diverse. The only unity is God. Well,